We begin at the G7 summit in France, where later this morning, President Trump will hold a highly anticipated press conference addressing the framework of a deal between the U.S. and Iran. Because of the lack of details known about this memorandum of understanding, some lawmakers from the president's own party have expressed skepticism about its legitimacy. But Vice President JD Vance adamantly defended the deal while appearing on CBS Mornings today.
The President of the United States used diplomacy, he used economic leverage, he also used military leverage in order to ensure that Iran would have a nuclear weapon. That was the goal. I think there are some people who just want the bombing to continue, regardless of whether it accomplishes anything for Americans. That's not what the president is trying to do. He's not trying to cause misery for the people of Iran. He's trying to ensure that they don't have a nuclear weapon, and that's what we've done.
Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. So, Ed, we expect that the President of the United States will speak later this morning, but you did hear a little bit of what the Vice President had to say during that interview with Norah O'Donnell on CBS Mornings. It will be interesting to see how that dovetails with what the President says later today.
Yeah, he has not been asked about the specifics since the agreement Sunday night, in essence because reporters just haven't had a chance to directly question him. There was one attempt at it a little earlier during some of the earlier G7 meetings. You can take a listen to what he had to say.
No, it's not final. It's a memorandum of understanding. And if I don't like it, we'll go back to shooting at them, dropping bombs on their head.
So no details there on what exactly is in this alleged page-and-a-half MOU, other than the sort of typical and oft-repeated threat of military action should things fall apart again. President also expected to get some questions on the more urgent concern that the Europeans he's been meeting with have regarding the future of the war with Ukraine. Some of these leaders have been saying that given that the Iranian talks may now be headed towards some kind of a resolution, or at least a clear diplomatic path forward, that perhaps then the Trump administration can shift its attention back to something they've been far more concerned about. And we'll see if he also gets questions about some other decisions he made early this morning regarding when and how and who exactly should serve as his next director of national intelligence. He kind of blew up what was set to be a pretty easy glide path for his nominee, Jay Clayson, to get that job, asking the Senate to hold off until his successor as the top prosecutor for the Southern District of New York is put in place. So all of that coming up in a press conference that's delayed and now not likely to start for at least another 90 minutes.
A lot of moving pieces, Ed. You're tracking it all. I want to hear a little bit more about the reaction in Washington to this memorandum of understanding, for lack of a better term.
Let's listen to some of what Democrats and Republicans have had to say about it and talk about it on the other side.
The regime is clearly still in place. The stickier issues regarding Iran and its ability to get a nuclear weapon, which it cannot have. There's no evidence that the details around that have been worked out. He's gotten the strait reopened. Well, the strait was open before he started the war.
In terms of how the negotiations work long term, let's see. Let's wait and see. When it comes to Iran, I'm pretty skeptical, but you never know till you try, so it's worth a try.
So you heard the Vice President earlier tell Norah that there are some people out there who want to just continue the bombing no matter the consequences. The Vice President's talking about Lindsey Graham, who, as you saw there, is skeptical that this diplomatic deal is going to work. And he had tweeted over the weekend, interesting to hear that the Vice President and the administration have put together a deal. He must come before Congress to explain it. We'll see if it works. So in essence, Graham is saying, okay, fine, let's give this a chance. But if not, let's go back to doing what we were doing, which was using the military to attack Iran and settle this once and for all. And that is exactly who Vance is calling out there in that interview this morning, saying that there are Republicans who want to just continue the military action when in reality diplomatic attempts need to be given a shot.
Ed, the other thing that I thought was interesting is President Trump praising Iran's negotiators in that bilateral meeting with Qatar. And you see a lot of Republicans, people who have been strongly supportive of the president over the course of not just this administration, but the previous one, who really believe that Iran is a terrorist regime hell-bent on destroying the state of Israel. And for the president to praise those individuals, as it's more than just this deal, right?
Yeah, no, and it speaks to the fissures certainly amongst Republicans about this. There are the Grahams and others who believe they should be taken out at all costs. and others like the vice president and the president who are inclined to try to cut a deal and avoid more bloodshed. And it's something that certain members of his base certainly are watching quite closely, and runs the risk of putting the president at odds with not necessarily his MAGA base, but with other elements of the Republican Party that certainly exist in Congress, and will be quite concerned that we are potentially conceding ground and giving back money to the Iranians that had been withheld all these years, given those 47 years of bad blood between the two countries.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much. For more on the situation in the Middle East, we are joined by CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab, who is in Tel Aviv. So, Imtiaz, there was a joint statement released by G7 leaders, which talked about how they support this initiative to help ships start moving through the Strait of Hormuz. So countries are stepping in saying they want to help. And of course, this follows the president being very critical of our allies who a few months ago were kind of sitting on their hands when he asked for their help in this regard. Which countries are we hearing from who want to be involved?
That's a really good way of putting it, sitting on their hands. Look, the president was really angry at the two key countries, and that includes Britain and France. These were two countries that he asked to join this coalition with Israel to carry out these strikes with Iran. They said politely, no, thanks. But now here they are saying, look, we have this memorandum of understanding. We think we have this memorandum of understanding. And if it's signed, we really want to be there in those seas and try to get these vessels out of there. But look, this is a complicated issue. It's not just, okay, the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. Let's start letting all this oil and gas go through. We have to remember that these tankers have been sitting there for 4 months now. You know, we were there maybe about 6 weeks ago, and you could just see tanker after tanker after tanker. And so there's just basic things like maintenance and whether or not these vessels can move out, and then how soon before they can actually be part of this sort of supply chain. Having said all of that, when it comes to things that I think people back home are really thinking about, which is the price of gas, if this memorandum of understanding is signed, if the Strait of Hormuz is open, the U.S. lifts its blockade, Iran lifts its blockade, the price of gas will go down. We've already seen energy markets respond positively to the news of an MOU, and many are hoping that that means that for those of us who are entering the summer months, that those gas prices and most crucially those jet fuel prices will come down if this deal is signed. Guys.
Imtiaz, this time yesterday, we were speaking to you about President Trump's public rebuke of Netanyahu's handling of the war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. In between our chat yesterday and today, there's been more military action in Lebanon. What can you tell us?
Look, it's extraordinary, not just to hear President Trump speak so publicly about his feelings about Israel's handling of the situation in Lebanon, and more specifically, his comments about the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, we have to remember, going back 4 months ago, these are two men who stood shoulder to shoulder and launched this war together. And now here we are. Israel's not even been part of the negotiation that has led to this potential MOU. For Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I've been covering this for nearly 15 years. I have never seen him being so beat up politically at home in Israel than I have now. And it's not just his political rivals, it's his allies too. And the key word that is coming through from those various factions in this country is that the war was a mistake, that Israel has lost it, and that they blame Benjamin Netanyahu, who for years had been pushing an American president to attack what they saw was this threat in Iran. And now here we are, and Israelis feeling like this was a squandered opportunity, and none of those goals that was set out by Mr. Netanyahu have been achieved. And that relationship, that crucial relationship with the U.S., is badly frayed, and they're pretty angry at their prime minister over all of it. Guys.
All right, Imtiaz Tyab reporting from Tel Aviv for us this morning. Thank you, Imtiaz.